Have you ever wondered why people stop appreciating you the moment you stop giving? Why your generosity, instead of building loyalty, ends up draining your wallet, your energy, and your authority? Today, we're solving the problem of destructive generosity and revealing why being too giving is the fastest path to weakness. Generosity, at first glance, appears noble, compassionate, and virtuous. Yet beneath its appealing surface lies a truth many refuse to acknowledge. Once you give, you create expectation. And expectation is the seed of entitlement. The moment you offer someone a gift, be it money, favors, or help, you unknowingly imprint an idea in their mind that you are someone who can give, and therefore someone who should give. The first gift is appreciated, the second is welcomed, the third is taken for granted, and the fourth becomes an obligation. What begins as kindness transforms into a silent contract you never agreed to sign. Human nature operates on a subtle but predictable rule. We normalize everything that benefits us. If you give freely, people will eventually believe that your giving is part of your identity, not a deliberate choice. They stop seeing the cost, the effort, the sacrifice behind your actions. Instead, they assume you have more to give always. Your generosity becomes their expectation, and your refusal becomes their disappointment. This shift happens gradually. A person who once smiled with gratitude might start asking more frequently, then more boldly, and soon more aggressively. They may not thank you as often, because in their mind, the exchange has changed. You are no longer performing an act of goodwill. You are simply fulfilling the role they assigned you. And roles, once assigned, are difficult to shed. But the true danger is not merely that people expect more. It is that they begin to judge you based on whether you continue giving. If you ever refuse, even for a legitimate reason, the people who benefited from your generosity may label you selfish, cold, or ungrateful. They will accuse you not because you owe them, but because they have grown accustomed to receiving. This is the trap. Generosity turns into obligation, obligation turns into resentment, and resentment turns back toward you the moment you stop feeding it. In the end, you lose control not because you gave too little, but because you gave too much. What once elevated you will be used to bind you. People forget the first 100 times you said yes. They remember only the one time you say no. Thus, the generous person becomes enslaved by expectations they never intended to create, held hostage by the very people they once tried to uplift. Many people believe that generosity, gifts, or displays of wealth can secure admiration or affection. They imagine that the act of giving will lead to lasting praise or deep loyalty. Yet admiration purchased with money is the most fragile form of admiration. It shines brightly for a moment, only to fade as quickly as it appeared. Why? Because it is not the giver who is admired, but the gift itself. People who applaud your generosity are often applauding their own gain. The compliments they shower upon you are not rooted in who you are, but in what you provide. Gifts create pleasure, and pleasure is always temporary. Once the excitement of receiving wears off, the admiration disappears with it. What felt like affection was nothing more than the emotional echo of a transaction. Even worse, the more one spends to maintain this admiration, the less impressive the gifts become. A lavish gesture that once amazed now becomes ordinary. A simple gift once appreciated now seems insufficient. People adapt quickly to comfort and convenience. What once seemed extraordinary becomes the new standard. This forces the giver into an endless cycle of escalating generosity, each gift needing to be greater than the last. And when you fail to maintain this upward spiral, when circumstances change, when money tightens, when priorities shift, the admiration collapses. Those who cheered your spending may distance themselves, criticize your newfound restraint, or drift towards someone else who offers more. Their loyalty was never yours to begin with. It was rented through your generosity, and the rental period has expired. The tragedy lies in how much effort the giver invests into maintaining this illusion. The desire to be liked, respected, or valued drives them to spend beyond their limits, hoping that money can accomplish what character cannot. They confuse admiration with dependency, and dependency with loyalty. But affection bought with wealth is always conditional. It lasts only as long as the gold continues to flow, and disappears the moment the well dries up. Wealth used to impress others is wealth wasted, for admiration rooted in self-interest fades, and what remains is bitterness from the giver and indifference from the receiver. True power never comes from purchasing affection. It comes from commanding respect that cannot be bought. Loyalty rooted in generosity is inherently unstable. When a person gives gifts, provides opportunities, or offers financial support to win over allies, followers, or friends, they are building a house on shifting sand. As long as the gifts keep flowing, the relationship appears strong. But the moment the giver pauses, even briefly, cracks begin to form. Those who were loyal out of gratitude remain a short while, but those who were loyal out of dependence quickly reveal their true nature. Dependence masquerades as loyalty. The receiver might speak of loyalty, commitment, and appreciation, but their attachment is to the benefits, not the benefactor. When the benefits stop, the illusion dissolves. The same people who once offered praise, admiration, and companionship begin to drift away, searching for the next source of advantage. They may even turn against the person they once claimed to respect if they believe a new alliance will serve them better. The giver becomes painfully aware of this when difficulties arise. If fortune declines temporarily or prudence forces restraint, those who appeared loyal may react with disappointment or hostility. They interpret the pause in generosity not as a strategic or necessary shift, but as a personal failing. Their resentment exposes the truth. They were never loyal to the giver, only to the gifts. Even more dangerous is what happens if the giver tries to reclaim what has been lost. If they enforce discipline, reduce expenses, or demand independence from those who relied on them, the very people who enjoyed their generosity will accuse them of being harsh or unkind. Thus, generosity turns into a weapon that others use against the giver when it no longer suits them. A truly secure ally is one whose loyalty is grounded in mutual respect, shared purpose, or aligned interest, not in gifts. Gifts can strengthen an existing alliance, but they cannot create a reliable one. Attempts to buy loyalty only attract opportunists, and opportunists are loyal only until a better offer arrives. In the end, the giver stands alone, bewildered by how quickly affection transformed into criticism. They believed they were building bonds, but they were only feeding expectations. Once the feeding stopped, the allies disappeared, revealing the emptiness of relationships built on generosity. Money possesses a unique power. It can build, destroy, restrain, provoke, or liberate. It is not merely a tool of exchange, but a force that shapes behavior, alliances, and outcomes. To use money emotionally, to give impulsively to impress others, or to soothe insecurities is to wield a sword blindly. Strategic use of money, however, can elevate a person to a position of control and influence. Emotional use weakens them, drains resources, and exposes vulnerabilities. A strategic mind understands that every coin spent must serve a purpose. It must strengthen leverage, secure advantage, or prevent greater loss. Money is most effective when used sparingly, precisely, and with foresight. A single well-placed investment can accomplish more than 100 careless acts of generosity. Yet most people treat money as a means of expressing feelings, guilt, pride, affection, or insecurity, rather than as a device of power. Emotional spending signals weakness. It reveals to others that you can be manipulated through sympathy, flattery, or the fear of disappointing others. Once people learn this, they will use emotional triggers to extract more. They will appeal to your kindness, your image, or your desire to be seen as generous. They will know exactly which words unlock your wallet. Strategic spending, on the other hand, is cold, deliberate, and calculated. It focuses on long-term outcomes rather than short-term gratification. A strategic spender studies who truly benefits from their money and who merely consumes it. They invest in strength, not dependency, in competence, not neediness. They avoid giving to those who contribute nothing in return and instead fund efforts that expand their reach, security, or influence. This mindset requires discipline, a refusal to let emotions guide financial decisions. It demands the courage to say no, even when others insist you must give. It also requires the ability to observe human behavior without sentiment, to discern who will become an asset and who will become a burden. Strategic use of money builds power. Emotional use destroys it. The wiser path is clear. Treat money not as a symbol of kindness, but as an instrument of control, deployed only when it strengthens your position. Many believe that power is demonstrated through displays of wealth, lavish spending, luxurious possessions, and extravagant generosity. They imagine that abundance impresses others and solidifies their authority. But true power does not arise from showing how much one has. It comes from controlling how much one gives. Scarcity, or the controlled perception of scarcity, is a far stronger tool than excess. When everything is abundant, nothing is valued. Gifts lose their impact when given too frequently. Opportunities lose their meaning when offered too easily. When a leader or individual constantly displays wealth, those around them grow accustomed to it. They come to expect excess, and expectation diminishes gratitude. But when resources are controlled purposefully, when they are offered rarely, and only to those who prove their worth, their value increases dramatically. Scarcity creates desire, discipline, and respect. It teaches people that rewards must be earned, not assumed. It also protects the giver from the pressure of constant demands. Moreover, abundance invites exploitation. If people see that you have much, they believe you can always give more. They interpret restraint as selfishness rather than necessity. They push for more because they assume you can afford it. They question your motives when you decline. Abundance attracts takers. Scarcity, however, creates boundaries. It signals that resources are limited, that favors cannot be given lightly, and that the giver holds control. It forces others to consider whether their request is worth asking. It elevates the giver's authority and makes each reward more meaningful. Thus, true power lies in managing scarcity with intention. A controlled flow of resources commands far more respect than an uncontrolled flood. The wise person understands that power comes not from how much they possess, but from how skillfully they restrict access to it. Generosity, when frequent and unrestrained, produces a hidden side effect. It weakens the discipline of the recipient. When people receive too much too easily, without cost or effort, they lose the drive to push themselves. They begin to rely on the giver's contributions rather than their own abilities. What starts as assistance turns into dependency, and dependency destroys ambition. Humans adapt quickly to comfort. The more comfort given, the less effort they exert. If someone knows that help is always available, whether it be money, support, or resources, they stop preparing for hardship. They stop developing resilience. They lose the instinct to survive on their own. Over time, this dependency becomes destructive. The recipient becomes less capable, less motivated, and more entitled. They may even feel resentment when the giver attempts to enforce boundaries, because the generosity has conditioned them to see effort as optional. Even worse, recipients who lose discipline often blame their struggles not on their own inactivity, but on the giver's failure to provide more. They reinterpret generosity as responsibility, and responsibility as obligation. The more you give, the more they expect. The more they expect, the less they do for themselves. This dependency weakens them, but it also weakens the giver. The giver becomes the one expected to uphold the household, the community, or the relationship. The weight of responsibility shifts entirely to their shoulders. The recipients contribute less while demanding more. Thus, generosity, when misapplied, becomes a trap. It destroys discipline in the receiver and burdens the giver with increasing responsibility. To preserve strength, both yours and theirs, generosity must be rare and earned, not constant and unconditional. When someone gives too freely, they eventually face the consequences of depleted resources. No matter how wealthy or powerful a person is, uncontrolled generosity creates a financial vacuum that must eventually be filled. And when the time comes to refill it, the giver is forced into a difficult position. They must either reduce support, increase demands, or extract more from others to compensate for what was lost. This sudden shift creates tension. The people who once praised your generosity begin to resent your new discipline. They do not see the financial reality. They see only that the benefits they grew accustomed to are now reduced or eliminated. They believe you have become greedy or unfair, even though it was their endless consumption that forced the change. Meanwhile, the giver must impose new rules, restrictions, or collection efforts to restore their stability. They may need to tighten budgets, raise expectations, or deny requests they once fulfilled automatically. These actions, though necessary, feel harsh compared to their previous generosity. Thus, the giver becomes the villain in the eyes of those who benefited the most. This shift reveals an important truth. Excessive generosity today becomes oppression tomorrow. If one spends recklessly to win affection or admiration, they will later have to behave strictly, even ruthlessly, to recover. The emotional burden of both extremes falls on the giver. People rarely appreciate the generosity that caused their dependence, but they always resent the discipline that ends it. When a leader attempts to win love, loyalty, or admiration through spending, whether on gifts, benefits, or comforts, they inadvertently create a dynamic in which others control them. Their leadership becomes conditional upon their ability to continue providing. If they stop spending, the affection stops. If someone else offers more, the loyalty shifts. Thus, the leader becomes bound to the expectations of followers, employees, or beneficiaries. Instead of leading, they respond. Instead of commanding respect, they chase approval. Instead of making decisions based on strategy, they make decisions based on fear of losing support. They become servants to the expectations they created. This dependency is particularly dangerous because it reshapes the leader's identity. They begin to believe that generosity is the source of their influence. They fear withholding because they imagine that without gifts, people will abandon them. They fail to see that a relationship based on constant giving is not leadership. It is a business transaction. Meanwhile, those around them learn to exploit this weakness. They exaggerate their needs, inflate their demands, and threaten to withdraw support if they do not receive more. The leader, desperate to maintain harmony, continues giving until they are financially or emotionally exhausted. In time, the leader loses authority. Their followers stop listening unless gifts are involved. Respect deteriorates because respect cannot coexist with dependency. Affection vanishes because affection cannot survive when it must be constantly purchased. Thus, the leader who seeks love through spending ultimately sacrifices power, dignity, and stability. They trade command for approval and end up with neither. Charity may earn applause, but restraint earns respect. A person who gives too freely is celebrated in the moment, yet their generosity is quickly forgotten. A person who exercises discipline, however, creates consistent boundaries that others learn to recognize and honor. Restraint signals control. It demonstrates that decisions are made with purpose rather than impulse. It teaches others that your resources, be they money, attention, or time, are valuable and not to be taken lightly. People may cheer generosity, but they trust restraint. Celebration is fleeting. Respect is lasting. When someone is known for restraint, their occasional act of giving carries far greater weight. A rare reward from a disciplined person is treasured more than constant gifts from a generous one. Scarcity creates value, abundance dilutes it. Restraint also protects relationships from corruption. When generosity becomes habitual, relationships transform into transactions. People start to measure affection through material gain. But when restraint is the norm, relationships are built on behavior, character, and consistency rather than gifts. Restraint also strengthens the giver. It preserves resources, prevents dependency, and maintains authority. It ensures that giving is always a choice, never an expectation. Thus, while charity attracts temporary gratitude, restraint builds enduring respect. The art of giving lies not in how much one gives, but in when, why, and to whom the gift is given. Most people give to appear generous, kind, or admirable. But gifts given for reputation are wasted, for admiration fades and reputation cannot repay the cost. Strategic giving, however, strengthens control. A rare gift carries more weight than a frequent one. A precise gift accomplishes more than a lavish one. A gift given to solidify alliances, reward loyalty, or create leverage produces lasting benefit. A gift given merely to impress wins nothing of value. When giving becomes a calculated act rather than an emotional reflex, each gift becomes an investment. It reinforces authority, binds allies, motivates action, or secures stability. The giver remains in control of the exchange, not subject to the expectations of others. The key is discipline, giving only when the outcome strengthens your position. Not when someone begs, not when someone flatters, not when your ego desires applause. Giving must never weaken your foundation or create dependence that burdens you later. Most importantly, the giver must never reveal their motives. A strategic gift appears generous but serves purpose. It earns loyalty without buying it. It grants advantage without exposing intention. Thus, giving, when done correctly, becomes a silent instrument of influence, far more powerful than generosity performed for admiration.